Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map, and this is 2020 people. Welcome to the new year, and this is the Inspired Tarot Map, and I would love to continue the series and bring you more inspiring and amazing people this year as well. And we open the year with a surprise guest. Welcome, Laurel. It's so nice to have you on the Inspired Tarot Map and to open up the 2020 Inspired Tarot Map series with you. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
So, for everyone who might be going, who's Laurel? Laurel is, her full name is Laural Virtues Wauters, and Laurel is the creator of the Tree Spirit Tarot and of another oracle deck that we're going to talk about as well briefly. But Laurel is a lover of trees, and she's a healer. And she has created this really soulful, beautiful, and all encompassing and kind of, I don't know how to even say it because it's soft, but it's truthful tarot deck. And I got really inspired, Laurel, by your deck. And then when I went onto your website and read about you and your life story and your work that you do, all your healing work and your love for trees, I thought, wow, I have to have you over on the Tarot Map because I just love people who are all like eclectic and really amazing in connecting different modalities, you know. So thank you for agreeing to it. And yeah, I hope my audience will also really enjoy our conversation. So
well, thank you, Kasia, for having me.
Yeah, Laurel, I always start with asking questions about ancestry and where you're coming from. You know, we always carry our DNA with us, and our ancestry plays, in my opinion, a really important part in who we are and how we find each other in this world. So could you share your story with us a little bit, because it's a very unusual story. So please do.
Okay, my ancestry is a little complicated. I was adopted as a baby, as an infant. I was born in Frankfurt, Germany. So I pretty much grew up thinking that I was full-blooded German. But then it was around when I was 40 years old that I discovered that I was actually not full-blooded German. My birth mother is German and French. And then I was told that her father, my grandfather, was Jewish, but I don't have any physical proof of that, but that's what I was told. And then my biological father was English, Scottish, Irish, and they had immigrated to the United States in the 1600s. And so they had been living in the colonies, and so his DNA came back, you know, Irish, Scottish, English, but then also Native American and Congo. So I'm kind of a mutt. I actually have a lot of different ancestry in me. So, but I was raised German. My parents that raised me were both from Germany, from at least their from Germany. So I guess Germany is probably the predominant ancestral. Yeah.
Line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a little bit about, because obviously if anyone wants to read, they can venture to your website and check that out, but would you like to share a little bit of story of how you found, like, because you were adopted, as you said, but like you also met your birth mom, and can you tell us a little bit how that happened and how that was for you?
Okay. Well, when I had always wanted to know, because I discovered by accident when I was 7 years old. We moved to the United States in 1961, which was the same year as the Berlin crisis. And we came to the United States. It was during the Cold War era. I moved into a small town in Wisconsin. I accidentally discovered I was adopted by finding a postcard, but my mother refused to talk about it. So it was like a big mystery to me. And it wasn't really until I was, like I said, like 39 years old, 40 years old, that all of a sudden I received a mysterious phone call from an elderly German woman. And she asked me, was this my telephone number? And I said, yes. And then she said, wrong number, and hung up. And my heart like jumped, because I was like, oh my goodness, this must be related to my birth mother. But how does this person, how did they find me? And both of my adoptive parents had already passed away. So this was actually on my first birthday after they had passed away. And this was 1989, which was also when the wall came down. So I thought, well, how ironic is this that we left when the wall went up, and now I get this phone call in December, right after the wall came down. But I was too afraid to do anything about it. Then she called again a couple years later, and this time I decided, okay, I'm gonna find out what this is, because she asked the same question and then hung up, and I couldn't connect it. So I found my parents had left my adoption papers. They were all in German. So I went through and called up the directory in Frankfurt, and the only name that I could find that still had a telephone number was this woman. And so I found someone who could speak German, because I was forbidden to learn German. Anyway, so I had him call this number, and it turned out it was my grandmother. And it turned out my grandmother is who had been following me my whole life, but it wasn't safe for her to contact me until both my adoptive parents were gone. So to make a long story short, she then gave him my birth mother's telephone number, and I called her that day, left a message, and she called me back and started crying. And I discovered that I had a birth mother that had been forced to give me up. I mean, she literally had been put in jail for 11 months, and she was fighting to keep me, but I was considered a war child, and this was in the 50s, right after World War II. And because my father was an American serviceman and my mother was a German unwed mother, she lost control of me. But because she wouldn't sign the papers, they kept her in jail, literally. And so when I found her, it was so bittersweet, because, I was like, I found this woman that was like my soulmate. And she was artsy, and she loved all the same music I loved, and she was spiritually aligned with me. But then she passed away within 9 months of me finding her, and she was only 61 years old. And my biological father, they married each other in 1963, and they tried to get me back, but they couldn't. So she had been praying that I would find her. And so then I did, and it was amazing, but then I lost her. So it's been difficult. That part's been hard. But she named me Carmen Sylvia. And what's really cool is that Carmen Sylvia translates into guardian tree. And she had a deep love of trees, just like I do. And we only got to be with each other twice. I was with her when we first met each other, as adults. And then I was with her when she passed. But both times we had these really deep spiritual, deep conversations, and trees came up a lot with both of us. So I knew, we were intrinsically connected that way. So, and she asked me to tell our story and to follow my soul, which is something my adoptive mother always tried to squelch. So that was interesting, because she finally gave me permission to be more authentic with my spirituality.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. I can imagine how bittersweet it must have been, especially that she passed away so quickly after you kind of found her. But nevertheless, beautiful that you did get connect, because I think that also was probably enough for you, being already a grown woman, to actually find that true mother.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's such a beautiful, beautiful connection. And some people who have birth mothers don't get to have these connections. So
Right.
kind of lucky that when you connected, you actually did connect on so many levels as well.
Yes.
Beautiful. Wow. So let's move to the trees, because the deck that you created, it's called Tree Spirit Tarot, and it's basically photographs of different trees with keywords. That's why when I did a little bit, I showed it on Instagram, I said that it reminds me a little bit more of an oracle, because you did give the keywords, you did keep the structure of tarot, but also it feels like an oracle just because they kind of images of trees, so they don't have the typical kind of tarot imagery or the archetypal kind of feel that each tarot card comes with. But if you know tarot system and if you know tarot, you definitely can find where the keywords came from, and it is connected, obviously. So can you tell me if you were interested in tarot in general before, or your kind of idea of creating the deck came only from this love of trees, or was it love of trees and love of tarot?
It's both. I mean, my love of trees, obviously, I've had that since I was a little girl. Okay, back in Germany, in Frankfurt, I played in this park, Holzhausen Park, and it was a really magical park. And in that park, I had this mystical experience with a tree spirit. And this tree spirit, through a series of encounters that I had, gave me this sense of that I had this purpose in life to help people understand each other better. And so this kind of sense of wonderment and questioning and trying to piece things together, because I took it on, I said, okay, I could do that, And then within like weeks of that revelation, we moved to the United States, and then my world like flipped upside down, and then I questioned everything. But that experience caused me to see trees in a completely different way. So when I came to the United States, I started going to the trees because I was like, okay, if I'm supposed to help people understand each other better, I need to understand myself. And trees, can you help me? So, and the trees were very different here in the United States, just the energy of them, everything was different. So I had to adjust to that. And so as I grew up, I always paid special attention to trees. Everywhere I went, they just had a different sort of pull to me. And of course, I started exploring different spiritual beliefs and religions, but then life catches up with you and you sort of forget about everything and you become a mother and a business person, which is what I did. But then when 9/11 happened, I remember I was crying in the shower because I was like, I blew it, because I didn't do my job. That's how I felt. And in that moment, the tree spirit kind of came to me again and said, work with me as the tree of life. And at the time I was vice president, creative director of an advertising agency. And at that time I was the president of the advertising agency. That's right. I was vice president when I met my biological mother. So I had this big responsible job, but I also took on this role of, okay, I am going to start to research the shared roots of world belief from 40,000 BC to present day on every continent, because I believe that trees are what interconnect us. And so as I started exploring the roots of world belief through the story of trees and through just nature itself, and the sun, the moon, the stars, I got into sacred geometry. I have a background in social work and psychology, so I was always into Carl Jung. And all of this kind of started to come together for me. And even though Jung didn't study the tarot, he was into archetypes. And so as I started to look at archetypes, the tarot started to come up for me. And so then I started studying the tarot. And so I was like, whoa, the tarot holds this really big archetypal story. And then as I was studying, archetypes of the tarot and belief, I was also studying the Kabbalah, and all of this kind of on my own in many ways. And I'm studying shamanic indigenous beliefs, and just all sorts of traditions, along with all the traditional, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, etc. And I was like, wow, so what I liked was that the tarot really does tell this really big archetypal story of us. And then I saw how the tarot was intrinsically connected to trees. And so I felt compelled to try to figure out, how do I communicate this bigger story, this foundational story of how trees have influenced world belief, how trees hold those stories of our archetypal journey in life throughout history.
Wow, that's beautiful. I always feel like trees, that they witnessed so much. And there's like unbroken link in tree communication, even when one tree dies, then like the whole wisdom is carried through the next one. And
right.
Yeah, I love trees too. So, do you have a favorite tree?
Oh,
It's
goodness.
a horrible question. If somebody asked me if I have a favorite tarot deck, I would go, nah, I can't pick one. But maybe you do have one.
Well, I mean, I guess, well, that's a hard one because I do love a lot of trees.
Then a few favorites, a few favorites.
Well, one of the trees that's really fascinating to me is what we call cedar, okay? And so when I came to the United States and I was really, felt very alone and isolated, and, you know, children bullied me for being different, I like would look for these trees to hang out with, and the trees hold me and protect me, and I felt like they were like nurturing me, were these what we called cedar trees. But in truth, they're arborvitaes. They're of the Thuja genus. So I find that tree to be pretty amazing.
Wow, yeah, cool. I think one of my favorites right now, because that of course changes as well, but I'm surrounded here by white birches and by aspen trees. For now, these ones are my favorite, but yeah, I love all of them also as well.
Yeah,
Oak trees and
I
yew
love oak.
trees and junipers also. With, yeah, I've got this awesome wand. Actually, I want to show you. Because I think it deserves to be part of our interview, because I call him Sufi, so it's a juniper branch, I think, because I found it on top of the mountain in Croatia. So there is his nose and his eye and his mouth and his turban.
Nice.
Yeah, and this branch feels like it went through everything. It feels like driftwood, but it was on top of the mountains. I think it went through all the elements, you know, like water,
Yeah.
fire, like storms and everything. So this one is, yeah, it's really cool. I love him. So he's part of my wand family, but yeah, that's Juniper for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, but we are here to talk about my wands, but
well, my talk, yeah, that's okay.
Exactly. So you came then, how did the idea of putting all of the tree knowledge come to put it into a tarot deck? Why didn't you do like oracle deck, for example, with trees? How come it's like, because you also created an oracle deck and it's called Chakra Mandala, right?
Mandala Chakra.
Mandala Chakra Oracle, yeah. And it's also very beautiful. And I want to ask you about this oracle deck as well. But then the trees come and you think, no, it's not going to be oracle. It's going to be a tarot deck. Why? Any reason, or you just?
Well, you know, it would have been a lot easier to do it as an oracle, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, it would have been way easier, and I could have added more trees. You know, it would have been a lot easier. But there was this other deeper story that I wanted to tell, because I think that the tarot becomes, you know, the tarot for some people is a word that's very triggering because they think of it as something dark and evil, sinister, which, you know, is a part of that whole kind of closing of the mind, kind of woundedness that we've been living in for quite a while now. But in truth, I think the tarot, because it does hold that energy of the four elements of nature, and then it holds the archetypal story of our journey in life. I really wanted to tell that story, but I wanted to tell it with the trees. So it was a challenge, but intrinsically I sensed in my heart which trees would fit. And then as I started to do the deeper research, I mean, I shifted a couple trees around here and there because it was like, oh, that tree would work, you know, actually fits better, because I didn't know that about that tree until I went deeper. So that's why.
And so you went with every kind of tree you picked. You did a lot of research, because the whole book actually that I wanted also, that comes with, I mean, you can buy the deck on Printer Studio, right?
Yeah.
And you can get the book separately on Amazon, right? So you don't get the book with the deck, but the deck is really reasonably priced on Printer Studio. And book can be got can be bought from Amazon. But you did go into huge amount of research, and actually the way you write, I love it because it's not so, you know, dry. Then you like birch tree, blah, 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 you know, all the facts, but actually you can feel how much you love the tree and how much you picked interesting facts about the tree, and so also that it does fit the archetype of the tarot. So I can imagine how hard it actually had to be with, you know, 78 cards in tarot to pick 78 trees from thousands of trees and then make them kind of fit the archetype. Like, yeah, that must have been a great job. So I don't know if you guys saw this deck. Nina from Shuffle Tarot has shown this deck as well. I did a review of this deck, so you can guys check it out. It will be linked below. But I'm glad that you actually used tarot system. I know it was more difficult than to just, as you said, just to pick trees and do oracle deck. But I'm just such a, I don't know, I'm a tarot girl. I love my oracles as well, but I love tarot system. And I think even though it feels because of the keywords and, you know, like just the photos, it feels very oracle-ish. But if you know tarot system, you have this extra knowledge or extra information that you can mix with the trees. And do you have any like stories maybe, or any magical happenings that were like, you know, that were happening to you when you were creating the deck? Was it, like you said, it was pretty easy and intuitive to pick the cards or the trees for the cards? Did you have any, like, I don't know, meditations, or you walk through the tree and the tree goes, I'm going to be justice? Anything like that?
Oh, there were many. I mean, my husband and my son and my daughter-in-law, they all would be like, "Do you know?" Blah, 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 because I would start to get all excited. But you know, oak tree. The oak is another tree that I have always loved. Back in Germany, I was connected to oak. I mean, oak has been throughout my entire life. So when I said before arborvitae, that was more like it's soft. It's a soft tree and it's sweet and it's loving, and that's what I wanted. But oak has been like strong and there. And so the more I started to study oak, that became like eye-opening for me. So between oak and cedar, because cedar again is not the arborvitae that I grew up with, it's the cedars of Lebanon in Lebanon and the Middle East. So probably cedar and oak were the two that really kind of, I went like, whoa, that's big stuff.
Yeah, can you share, just for the sake of people who don't have the book, they don't have computer, they can't see your website.
Yeah, okay.
Just a little bit on oak, because I think a lot of us find oak very, like, an amazing tree as well.
Right. Oak itself is a tree that is evergreen, and it's also deciduous, so there's a wide variety of oak that are throughout the world. And so because oak is found in so many different parts of the world, it's got this really big story. So one of the most interesting stories that I could find that's actually documented goes back to the oaks of Dodona about 2000 BCE in Epirus, Greece. And these oaks of Dodona, people would go there. It was the grove of oaks was dedicated to Gaia as the Mother Earth, as the Earth goddess. And people would sit there and listen to the sound of the wind come through the leaves of the oak. And that was the oracle, okay? And so it was the oracle, the Dodona oracles. And so, and they were originally dedicated, like I said, to Gaia. Then eventually they got dedicated to Zeus and Dione. And Zeus and Dione, this is kind of like 800 BCE, so like 1200 years later. Think about that. That's 1200 years. They were seen as, Gaia's voice was coming through the leaves of the oak, with the wind, the help of the wind. So then they got dedicated to Zeus and Dione. Then around 300 BCE, it got dedicated only to Zeus. Okay, so it became patriarchal, but they were still seen as an oracle. But then when Romans and Roman Christianity came around, then they cut down the rest of the oaks. Okay, so the oaks were destroyed because of their pagan roots, and they didn't want to have the voice of the divine, because actually even the word divine comes from Dios, which was Sanskrit, Proto-Indo-European. It's the roots. So the roots of the oak, the sound was actually also the origin of the word divine and deity, etc. So that's pretty fascinating. So then you fast forward with this Proto-Indo-European language, and you get into like the Germanic Celtic cultures of the runes. Okay, so you have the runes, and Anzus being the first rune, Ansuz, was seen as kind of a god. Anzus was like an ancient god, and it was dedicated, actually. Anzus meant the mouth or voice of God, which was actually the mouth or voice of an Asher oak. Okay, so they took the Anzus rune and then eventually separated into 3 kind of vowel sounds. And so this energy of the oak then, you know, was also part of the whole Germanic culture, which also influenced our present day alphabet. Well, I think many trees are oracles. The Oracle of Delphi is also, you know, based originally on laurel trees. You know, so the laurel trees were the oracles because they would sit and listen to the oracle tree, you know, the laurel trees. So I think many trees have been oracles throughout history. It's just that we don't know about them because it's been erased.
Yeah, it's such a pity. And I think like it's such a beautiful image, like with Tree of Life. Obviously there's nothing new which I'm going to say now, but like have this roots and that openness, like, and that, yeah, the core which connects the 2 worlds. It's just such a beautiful. So trees are amazing. And are you using your deck in your practice with clients, or is it mostly for your self practice? If you ever use it, I don't know how it is because I've never created a deck, but if I did, I probably used it, or then I thought like, it's boring now, I don't want to use it.
Well, I use it primarily as an educational tool.
Yeah.
Because I don't really do readings for people, but what I'd like to do is I teach. So for me, this along with Mandala Chakra, they're both tools for educating because people, it's nice to have visuals and stories. And so this way it creates a construct to be able to tell the stories. And so
what
I
do you teach? What do you teach?
Well, I teach a variety of different things. I'm a mandala facilitator, so I help people go into meditation using mandalas, but then I like to have a theme with the mandalas. And so like with Mandala Chakra, I'll work with it through the chakras. I've also identified trees that kind of hold the archetypal energy of the chakras. I'll do like classes, like a weekend intensive I've got coming up in May on Tree Spirit Tarot. I've done classes already on Tree Spirit Tarot. I'll give lectures at universities and groups and whatever. So I just like to teach about the interconnection that we have, you know, between all the different beliefs and using trees and using our internal map. So I do a year-long medicine wheel program, which is like a series of 7 intensive weekend. I did that for 7 years. I did 7 year-long programs, but now that I'm in Oregon, I haven't done one here. So I'm kind of resetting here in Oregon. So yeah.
Yeah. So your chakra, the Mandala Chakra Oracle deck, that's based basically, because I only saw on your website, you know, like the, what is it, like the index of what's in the book, you know? And I thought, wow, that's interesting because it's a different take on chakras because there's so many oracle decks on chakras. And to be honest, most of them I don't particularly like, but I really was fascinated with your one. I don't have it to show you guys, but you can take a look at Laural at your website. And can you just, before we finish off, can you tell us about the organization, like how you created this one, how this one came together, and what was like the main purpose for you to like make it in the oracle?
Okay, so I did Mandala Chakra first, and then Tree Spirit Tarot came second. So with Mandala Chakra, that was driven by the number 7, to be honest with you. My life path number is 7. 7 has always been a number that has driven me my whole life. It's like when I see a 7, I know that that's something I have to pay attention to. So that number 7 pulled me into why is it so sacred? Why is number 7 so sacred? So then I started looking at the chakras. Why are there 7 chakras? And because the idea of that tree of life, tree of knowledge concept, and that knowledge became kind of associated with our original wound, so to speak, our original sin, whatever, that I was determined to become knowledgeable about whatever it was I needed to know. And it seemed like 7 kept coming through. So I looked at the chakras in this big, more expanded way. And so I started working with, in the shamanic tradition, I looked at kind of nature's archetypes and how that worked, like with serpent and predator prey and eagle, and then the roots of the tree and the trunk of the tree and the branches of the tree. So the tree is in Mandala Chakra for sure. But then I looked at sacred geometry, and sacred geometry was always fascinating to me because of numbers. And there was a lot of esoteric, very kind of hard to grasp information about sacred geometry. And I was like, I just know this is pretty, there's a part of me that's very driven by, I want to have concrete, I want concrete evidence. It's not, there's an intuitive aspect of me, but I want this concrete. So I started researching sacred geometry and what each of these symbols, from the circle to the Vesica Pisces to the seed of life. And what I discovered was it's really a formula for time. It's a formula, it's a calendar. It's every single circle, every single number of circles. And then when you get to, like the fruit of life, and you start to intersect in Metatron's cube, and you're intersecting the circular and the linear world together, which has the 78 lines, which is how many cards there are in the tarot. You start to see this interconnection of the natural world, and following the sun, the moon, the stars, the rotation of the earth, the relationship to all of this. And you realize that's what these big mystery teachings were all these years. And so what I wanted to do is take these really big concepts like sacred geometry and then the elements of nature and Jungian consciousness and world belief and all of this, and show how we hold all of this within us. So I thought the chakras, even though I know for some people it feels kind of new agey, just like how the tarot can feel very esoteric and weird for people, to me it was like, okay, we need to take this and bring this all back to a place of, this is all based in nature. All of it is based in nature. And we hold all this within us. We've just been disconnected from it. So, yeah.
That sounds great.
I talk really fast when I get
No,
excited.
that's great. That's exciting. That was really inspiring also. And I think, I'm definitely going to take a look at that because I love that index. Yeah, I was just thinking, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. And I was like, curious. I've got to ask you about it. So how many cards is in your oracle deck?
There's 49. So it's 7 chakras times 7,
Yes.
7 different perceptual states.
Okay.
So 7 perceptual states. And the number 7 is based on those, the 5 planets plus the sun and the moon, which were the watchers or the heavenly sages, however you want to look at that. And then that which relates directly to the menorah, which relates to the tree of life, which relates to the Kabbalah. So it all kind of comes together. It's the organizing number. So it's like when you're in 7, you're putting all the pieces together and figuring things out. And
that's also very much the 7s in tarot, like 7 of Wands, 7 of Swords, 7 of Cups, and Pentacles, right? It's like, adjusting, getting rid of, focusing on something. Yeah, exactly. So that's my year.
Good. It's a good year.
Yeah. So to finish our interview, I would like to ask you if you use tarot or oracles in your own life, like for yourself, as an inspiration or in any other way, or is there any specific way that you use your cards that you maybe would like to share?
Well, I pull a card almost every night before I go to bed. That's just been something I've done for probably 20 years now. And there's a number of decks that I've worked with over the years. Most recently, I've been pulling my own cards because part of it helps me proofread what I've written. I still find little things I want to tweak, and I go, oh my goodness, I should have written that a little better. but I find them to be, always it's a source of inspiration and guidance. The other thing that I do is when I teach classes, something that I'll do is I'll work with 3 sets of major arcana cards. And now I wouldn't use my set because, yeah, they're not traditional tarot. But if you have the traditional tarot with the imagery that kind of suggests more the archetypal stage of life, depicted in the tarot, I'll have 3 decks of the major arcana, and then I'll have people, like, let's say I have a class of 12 people, and you break them into groups of 3, and then you have them pull 3 cards. It's called a 3-card story. I learned this when I was doing my 4 Winds training. And what happens then is you tell people to start a story like, once upon a time, there was a person looking for love, okay? And so they all start with the same story. And these, let's say 4 groups of 3 people each of them are looking at the same 3 cards. So in that group of 3 people with their 3 cards, they have to start beginning a story, middle of story, end of story. And each of those 3 people has to use the first card as the first part of their story. The middle card is the middle of the story, and the last card is the end of the story. And it's always fascinating how everyone sees their story in the cards and writes a completely different story from each other. So and then you see how this plays out with different scenarios within the group, and it's always fascinating because it shows how we project our life onto what we see. And like how someone can see the Hanged Man and see someone being relaxed and calm, and then someone else can see death and fear, and so it's just, or somebody sees somebody being tortured. So it's really fascinating. You project your stuff onto the cards, and so I like working with that because it's a nice way to then help people see, okay, you see how this same people, same story, same everything, same cards,
Wow.
totally different stories.
So just to confirm, if I understood right, you have, let's say, 4 groups of 3 people. That doesn't
Yeah.
matter, but like 3 people. You have 4 sets of major arcana. Each of them has the same. Each group has the same major arcana cards. 3 of them, yes.
Well, they get to pick from this group. So so of the 4, maybe just let's say there's 3 people, and they just are doing 3
Yeah,
cards.
exactly.
Sorry. So you have 3 people. They pick out of this group of 3 decks of cards. So they could feasibly pick all 3 Hanged Man cards. That's why you do it.
Okay.
So then therefore there's an opportunity that they could end up with 2 or 3 of the same card by having 3 decks. But by doing that, then they pull those cards, but they all have to write based on the same cards they're looking at and with the same premise of the story. But they all write a different story. Yeah.
Okay, so I pull the Hangman, you pull the Death, and somebody else pulls the whatever, and we all write about these 3 cards.
Right, because the Death card would be the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
The whatever Hanged Man would be middle of the story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we compare the stories and we see how much, I totally agree, because obviously also if working as a tarot reader, or that interpretation and your personal kind of intuition, every tarot reader would sometimes tell a different story, and none of us would be wrong.
Right.
Or all of us would be wrong.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's a beautiful way to, I want to try this with some friends, because it's really interesting to see that and experience that different seeing and different story making, and then making stories out of cards. It's also really amazing as well.
And it helps people see where they are in their life right now. So it's kind of a nice way to reveal their own healing journey, or what they're dealing with right now in their life, because that kind of comes up.
That's exactly what I feel like tarot is perfect for. Just really kind of reflects beautifully what's happening for you now, so that you have some tools and also some reflection or food for thought of how to maybe move forward, which you also can pull cards for, but it's really up to you. Tarot is not set in stone, and won't bind you to the picture if you don't want to go there. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's fascinating. Well, Laurel, I think we're going to wrap it up. But thank you so much for being a guest, for creating these beautiful decks. And are there any last question? Are there any plans for another deck in the future, or are you done with decks?
Well, I was thinking if I do another one, it might be on just the trees of the Pacific Northwest, or maybe it would be more of a pure oracle deck on trees. Um, but it takes a lot of energy to write, and I really want to get more physically involved in life again
Yeah,
because I've written 3 books now, and I need to get physically active, and because
yeah.
writing is so sedentary and it's so heady.
But you can walk around, meet the trees, sit under those trees and write there. You'll be outside. Yeah, but I know, I hear you. I totally hear you. It's, yeah, sometimes when I do a lot of readings, I feel the same. It's just quite isolating because I record a lot for people video readings. So yeah, I also feel like this need to like out. Like when I was making wands, it was much more nature based, and yeah, it was kind of beautiful like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, fingers crossed, if you want to do that, I hope this project will come, to life and you'll manage to do it. But thank you for creating these 2 beautiful decks and for bringing the love for trees that so many of us share. And it was lovely to meet you, Laurel. So thank you so much for being a guest on the channel.
Thank you, Keisha.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. We're going to say goodbye now. So all the best and see you for the next episode. Bye guys.